This is Sterling Selover from Stingbot Games. You are listening to We Are One, You Are Two, a PlayStation podcast.
We are back, and this is episode 73 of the We Are One, You Are Two PlayStation podcast. I am your host, as always, Rob Vanzo, joined once again by the man who won't stop laughing in the background, Matt Rhodes.
Well, now that you mentioned it, you can't cut it. Oh, man, good times. Hey-oh, hi, everyone.
So, Matt, we're not going to spend too much time chatting today like we normally do. In fact,
That's okay.
I almost hesitate to number this episode because it's going to be another indie interview.
Yeah.
This week we have Sterling Selover from Stingbot Games. He's coming to talk to us about the Forbidden Arts, his game that is coming to Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation 4, of course. It's already on early access on Steam, so you can go check it out there for just under a tenner if you're interested and want to get an early build of the game. But it will be coming to consoles later this summer. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about that with him and his journey to get there from mobile gaming. So I don't want to hesitate too much, Matt.
Yeah. No official announcement. I want to qualify for the people. No official announcement as to when exactly it's coming out as of yet. But he wants to, and I believe he wants to make an announcement within the next month or so. So
yes, and so we'll talk to him a little bit about that, as you'll see.
Yeah.
And so let's go ahead and get into it. Sound good?
Sounds good to me, Robert.
All right. All right, so this week we have Sterling Selover from Stingbot Games joining us here. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his latest project, as well as a little bit about the industry as well, and his design philosophy. And then we're going to do a little bit of wrap-up just for fun with some stuff as well, too. So Sterling, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited. I believe Amy Smith was the one that introduced us.
Yeah. Amy's awesome. She's really cool, great voice actress, and just a really cool person in general.
Yeah, she is. We had her on the podcast a couple months ago to talk about some of her projects. Is she working with you on this project?
Yeah, she's voiced some of the enemies in the game. So yeah, she definitely comes through on a few different areas.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's actually talk about you a little bit, and then we'll talk about the project and get into the name and everything like that. But tell us a little bit about you as a dev. How long have you been kind of designing? Where did you get your start? How was your initial interest in designing games?
Well, I started in 2011, and at the time I was actually working an accounting job, and I didn't actually know anything about game development. I just hated my job and wanted to do something different. So at the time, the mobile market, iPhone and everything was coming up, and it was a great opportunity for new developers to kind of jump in and try things. So that's where I got my start, was in mobile. And I just basically, for about the first year from 2011 to 12, I used to ride BART, which is Bay Area Rapid Transit. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, or I used to. And I used every day on the BART train, I would read programming books on the way to and from work every day. So it was an hour each way. And I did that for about a year. And then from there, I just eventually started writing my own stuff and released something. It actually made some money, and I kept going. So it's been a long process ever since. And I've released over 20 games and applications since I started.
Oh, wow. So
that's awesome.
Self-taught then, huh?
Yeah, I'm self-taught. I think that it's very common these days. There's so many resources out there. I've developed I started writing Objective-C through Xcode, and then I shifted over to Unity once I discovered that engine, which, even back then it was still coming up a bit. And Unity's just it's incredible, especially the way it's evolved today. It's a really, really good engine.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
Real cool.
Yeah, that's great. Now you've released over 20, and so they've always been independent on your own, kind of. You haven't worked for anybody, or
I've never worked for another software development or game development company, but I mean, I've done consulting work for other companies as well as individuals, always on the programming side. That's where my strength lies. And I guess I've done of my own games and apps where it was released through one of my companies. I've probably done, I think, somewhere around 10 to 12. I'd have to count. Some of them were really bad, so I kind of just don't talk about those anymore. So, but yeah, 10 or 12, and then I've done a lot of consulting work too. So consulting work was a heavy mix throughout the first few years while getting things going, as well as still doing the accounting job at the time. So I only went full time as of 2014. And this has been my full time job since.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, I assume you because you mentioned the mobile market and getting into games. I assume you were into games before that as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my whole life. I mean, I've been playing games since 1989. So.
Nice.
I'm since yeah, exactly. So I've been playing since the very first time I laid eyes on Super Mario Brothers on the NES.
Okay, great, awesome.
Yeah.
Now, why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about the project itself then, and kind of get into that. So, obviously, for those that don't know, Sterling has released it. It's an early access, correct?
Yeah.
On Steam.
Yeah, the Forbidden Arts. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about Forbidden Arts and what it is for those who are hearing this for the first time or are unfamiliar with the game.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, the Forbidden Arts is an action adventure platformer where you play as a pyromancer named Phoenix, who sets off an adventure to discover more about himself, and in the process learns about his much larger purpose in the story, and learns how to channel all these different ways to channel the element of fire. And it's really about it's like your journey of becoming a master pyromancer and dealing with this threat that eventually unfolds and spreads throughout the world that you're living in. So it's really like inspired by a collection of things from my childhood, as well as games that I love, a series that I love. You can definitely find huge influences from the Zelda franchise, from Street Fighter. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that I did not model the main character's fireballs directly from you and Ken off of Street Fighter. It 100% was. But I mean, I think that's what's cool, is you take things from games that you love and you use that inspiration to, make something unique that you're envisioning, and that's what I've tried to do with the Forbidden Arts.
Awesome. Yeah, I can tell. I've been looking at the game over the last couple of days, and the Zelda influence is very apparent, and in a good way. I think that if you're going to role model or kind of get an idea from anything in gaming, Zelda's a great place to look for initial influence.
Yeah, and I mean, I could talk about a lot of different aspects of the game, but I'm not sure what you guys would want to hear more about. But as far as just inspirations go, I mean, those are just two of the inspirations. There's dozens more from RPGs and that I grew up playing, even MMOs as well. I mean, there's a lot of influence from different genres in here, yeah, it's really just a collection of things that I love. This is a passion project, first and foremost. I got to the point in my development career where I was financially capable of doing something more than what I had been. And I don't mean that what I had been was bad by any means, but it was just, it was all mobile games, and it was, in order to take the step and really try and produce something for PC or console, I think there is a higher quality bar that needs to be achieved in general, and I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do it, I was really going to give it a shot, but it's expensive. Game development is really expensive, and it was I completely self-funded the game, and it cost an obscene amount of money. So, I mean, it's a labor of love, but at the same time, I poured a lot into it too. I mean, there was no backing or anything. It was really just me giving it my all. You know what I mean?
If you don't mind me asking, what made you decide to go that route? Because that is something. I mean, we live in an age of Kickstarter. We live in an age of GoFundMe and crowdfunding. We also do see a lot of people who reach out and do Patreons or do different things for game development. What made you decide to do, or even publishers, right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to go self-funded?
Well, like I said, I was financially capable of doing so. I think a lot of people that do go self-funded, they need the funding. And I could definitely have tried to do that, but at the same time, my whole history of development has been in mobile games. Not that I don't play console games and PC games, because that's primarily what I do play. But the thing is you know, as my start, you know, I started there. So, you know, without a history or, you know, something to leverage to gain people's interest, I think it was more along the lines of, you know, I can do this myself, and I believe in it enough, so, hey, I'm just going to do it. It's as simple as that. I mean, I think Kickstarter's great. I really do. Right. And I think there's a lot of projects that benefit from it, and I think mine probably could have as well, but early access has been great as well as far as feedback goes, and I think it's really, really helped strengthen the game, and I mean, I think that'll show in the final product. All of the media assets that we have online, they're not an accurate representation of the current state of the game. So I think that you know, I think that people will definitely see that it's come a long ways as over time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And what made you decide to go early access? Because I knew that's a hard choice for a lot of developers.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people get a little anxious, I think, and go, well, it's been in early access forever.
Sure. I knew exactly what I was doing with it, but I didn't know what to expect because, first of all, I've never done PC console before, and I never have done early access, so I knew what I was getting into. I did my research, but I didn't quite understand that some games really don't benefit from the program very well, and what I mean by that is certain genres. Like my game, you know, it's a linear game, and people, I think the genres that tend to do best in early access that really benefit the most are games like RPGs or open world games, battle royale games, you know, multiplayer games in general, sandbox style games, things with a lot of replayability, but not necessarily something linear that when I released the game, it was in a pre-alpha state, and it only had 30% of the game's content included, and pretty much all that content has since been changed. So it's kind of like, you know, it's like you have this idea going into it, like what you want to achieve and get from it, and in the process, so much can change. I definitely feel that we benefited from it, and what I mean is that I went in expecting to get a lot of feedback to really help improve the game, and that's the only reason I entered the program. Because, like I said, being the first console and PC game, I wanted to make something that people enjoyed. And what I didn't understand when I entered, though, is that people expect a really polished product even if you're going into early access, and oh my god, the Forbidden Arts was not in a super polished state when it entered. But I didn't really realize that people expected it to be that way. That was my biggest mistake going in, was that I released it too early. I should have waited another year and then pushed it out, but you know, what can you do? It was a learning experience, and regardless, I think that the feedback, both positive and negative throughout the whole process, has been really helpful. And I mean, I respond to everybody. I literally respond to all the reviews. I respond to people emailing me, and I take everything into account, and I've made so many changes to the game to really try and strengthen it. So I think that it came out for the best, you know? I went in there looking for something, and even though it had a rocky start, I learned a lot from it, and definitely realized that it, you know, if I were to go back and do it again, would I? Yes, but not until a much later time. You know what I mean? I feel like it would have been a little better if I waited another year.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like that decision kind of helped push you to work like harder and faster? Like, kind of like not knowing that most games come out like a little bit more polished, and getting that kind of feedback from them, or
it definitely did in the beginning. Like the first few months were pretty tough on me when it came to my work schedule. I mean, I was pushing out 100 hours a week, and my average work week is probably between 70 and 80 hours. So it's not like I don't work a lot as is, but when you push 100-hour work weeks, week after week after week, it really drains you. I mean, physically, I was actually starting to feel some like I was having some physical health issues too because of it, and that's when I kind of was just like, okay, maybe I'm like trying a little too hard here. I'm only one person. Like it's like you try and take on a lot. I'm not the only person that worked on the game, but it is my project, and I'm, like I said, the only programmer, so it was a lot of work. But I definitely pushed really, really hard, and I listened to everybody, and I still do. So I think that it panned out the way it was supposed to, but it was definitely not an easy path. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, sounds like it. Now, when you're going through and kind of working your way through those, that build, and you're talking about the final design, being almost or the game being completely different from the beginning when you first released it on Steam. How much do you see, or how many setbacks have you encountered? Any weird setbacks or struggles or difficulties that have kind of delayed it a little bit further than you expected, or is everything kind of run? Because you're putting in all those hours and all those work weeks, and of course you mentioned about making yourself physically ill. But in terms of the game development itself, has there been any setbacks or things that you didn't anticipate that you've gotten either out of early access or as you continue to build the game itself?
There have been some setbacks, yes. Going through the whole console registration process through Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo was more challenging than I expected it to be. Obviously, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on a lot of the console processes because of my NDA with each one. But I mean, the process, I'll just say, it was more challenging than I expected it to be on pretty much every front. I mean, a lot of developers I've read blogs about it and lots of things, stories about how people say that porting games can be challenging, and I kind of was like, oh, it can't be that hard. I've ported to so many different platforms at this point. I know what to expect, and oh my God, was I wrong. It was the most challenging thing in the course of the Forbidden Arts' development was porting to the consoles, hands down. Was the most challenging part, and it's because it's my first time. Like when you're porting for the first time to anything new, it's going to be challenging. But when you're porting to the first time for a new platform that also has like hundreds of different certification requirements that you have to meet on each different platform, then it can get a little bit overwhelming, and you just have to take it day by day. So that's definitely was the biggest challenge, but I got through it, and once you get through it once, you can burn through it the second time. That's the good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I understand too, I mean, I can imagine too being completely independent as you are. It's a little bit different when you have a publisher helping you work through that stuff. They have that established relationship, and so I can imagine that is difficult to kind of work through all of that and get through. But speaking of that, I guess I know you've mentioned this a couple of times on Twitter. You mentioned about a full release date. Mm-hmm. Do you have something set in stone yet, or are you still kind of eyeing out a particular, a general area?
Yeah, we'll be announcing something later this month.
And so will it be a simultaneous release on all three platforms, consoles?
I can't say yet, but
okay.
The only thing I will say is that it's everything was done for the best.
So, talking a little bit more about the game itself and the process and everything like that, what are you looking forward to most for players discovering in the game, or what do you hope that players will also get out of? I guess it's kind of two separate questions. What do you hope they'll get out of the game as they play through it, and what are you looking forward to them discovering the most about it?
What I hope they get out of it is that it's an enjoyable experience. I mean, I created this game as a passion project. It's a game of of love, and that's it. I didn't create the game specifically to, capitalize on some gimmick or trend. I made this game specifically because I wanted to make something that I enjoyed, and in turn, I really, truly hope that people find enjoyment as well. I'm also trying to price the game very fairly. I think it's worth more than what we're going to be asking for it, but I truly believe that maybe some people will take more of a chance on it as well because of that. I think that as long as people are enjoying it and they're having fun, then that's great. That's what this whole process has been for me. So I hope that that's going to be what happens in the end. And if that isn't the case, well, then I will do whatever I can to try and rectify the situation. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the recent kind of Bloodstain release on Switch. I don't know if you guys have followed that at all, but
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten great response on PS4, but at least the developer has been actively kind of stating that they're going to be trying to tweak it on Switch and fix a lot of the issues that people have complained about. And you know what though? Like, in their defense, I will say that the Switch is so much harder to optimize for than people think. It really, really is. I just think that I think they did a good job. So, but that's coming from a developer that understands the situation.
Yeah, and I can only imagine. We've talked to enough devs that I really, and this is one thing I enjoy about doing this for our podcast is that you really get a sense of how difficult sometimes platforms are to work with because of the different architectures and the different designs and different limitations. So,
yeah, and I mean, even the base PS4, I mean, that came out in 2013, and you got to consider if it came out in 2013, the hardware is probably from 2010, 2011. So I mean, you're already dealing with hardware that's like 9 years old, and then you come out with the Switch on top of it, which is like the equivalent to the PS3 hardware or something.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, so we're dealing with hardware from 2004 now. It's just like it's so much harder than people really think. And I'm not saying the Switch isn't a great device. Obviously, I own one plus the dev kit, and it's like I love my Switch, but I think that people don't quite realize how challenging it can be. And also, just to add on that, I am just because I feel like a lot of people don't share enough on the subject, and I like to be very vocal about my experiences in indie development. And I'm actually going to be sharing a blog on my entire porting process of the Forbidden Arts to the Switch. So it's a couple weeks. I'm probably going to release it after we make some announcements. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, while we're thinking about it, you want to tell people where they'll be able to find that once that does come out?
Yeah, it'll be on our website on stingbotgames.com, and then I'll also probably post it on some other sites. We'll see. Maybe I'll push out to Game of Sutra or something.
Cool.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome. I do love when devs share stories like that. It's really fascinating, and you should know that as somebody that's on the other side. It gives you a different appreciation for what developers go through.
Yeah, I read stuff like that all the time. I think it's entertaining. So cool. So I know we probably got a little off base, but if you want to go back to the questions.
Oh, that's fine. So speaking of just kind of general design philosophy, because we talked a little bit about Forbidden Arts, you talked a little bit about the Zelda influence and Street Fighter influence. How much does what's going on in the industry, when you started this project, how much of what's going on in the industry had any kind of influence on you? Or, as somebody who's self-taught, I guess, what interests you in doing something by yourself versus, perhaps going to work for somebody who's a publisher or, becoming a developer within an established company?
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me is I like my freedom to do what I want when I want. And if I want to go to the gym at 10 a.m. or at noon and I want to go out for pizza after, and I'll do it. I don't need to I can work any time of the day whenever I want. So I really like that freedom. I don't think you can get that working for another company. I've worked for a lot of companies, some very big, not game development companies, but prior to doing all this, and you never have the same kind of freedom. Eventually, you have to respond to somebody, and I guess I just don't like that. I like to make the shots, and I'm not saying I make them right. I make a lot of wrong calls, but they're still my calls in the end. So. Yeah, that's what I like about it the most is the freedom, and also when it comes to creativity, I'm the sole creative force behind the Forbidden Arts. So every character, every piece of dialogue, all the music you hear in the game, everything was created by me. So, which I don't know if I mentioned, but I've also been a musician since I was 5 years old. So I also made all the music for the game. And most of it's recorded on an acoustic guitar as well, because I wanted to give it like a really kind of fantasy vibe, and the theme of the music is based off of acoustic guitar. So yeah, it was fun recording it all and doing everything too.
So you really have done everything when you're talking about start to finish.
Yeah, everything except for the 3D art animations and voiceover. I'm a terrible voice actor. You got to know your strengths. Some people that think they can do it all, and I mean, really, it's like nobody's going to tell them, hey, you're really bad at this. Maybe you should do something else. I just try and be realistic about what my strengths are and what I'm not good at. And 3D art, I am not good at, and animations, I am terrible, and voice acting, I'm even worse. So, yeah, there you go.
Now, do you feel that your mobile background helped you kind of get ready for this then and prep you in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I made, so during the course prior to this, I made, like a dozen different games and apps, anything from educational games for kids to full on just like action games, or I made endless running games on mobile. I made all kinds of stuff, and I did a lot of outsourcing work and consulting work during, like I said, the beginning phases. So I had a lot of experience, but when you jump into console and PC development, no matter what, it's going to feel pretty new. Right. Like dealing with completely different types of architectures and obviously you're still developing in Unity, but you have a lot more tools and you have so much more graphical power at your disposal. It's kind of cool at first. I was like, wow, I can do so much stuff that I couldn't do before, so it was cool in that regard. Yeah, I mean, overall the whole thing has been a cool process.
Funny because you're talking about like 100-hour work weeks, and then you go into how you talked about how you creatively did everything, and just I don't know, you see all these articles in the industry about developers being overworked by the companies as when crunch time comes, and these are and it's funny that you have this kind of self-imposed
well, you have to as an indie developer. Let me put it this way, as anything in life, I feel if you're trying to do it on your own, you have to work twice as hard as the other guys, because otherwise you're not going to succeed unless it's by sheer luck. And I've just always had that kind of mentality in general, and I think that's another reason why I don't work for other companies or in general, is because I just think a little different. Like you're right, absolutely. And about like you hear these articles, and I read the same articles you probably read about employees complaining about 70 hours during crunch time, and I kind of smile to myself because I'm like, that's just a normal work week for me. And 70 is like a low work week for me. I mean, my average is probably 80, and during crunch time for me is 100. So, and it's like you just do what you got to do when you're indie. There's nobody holding your hand or providing you a paycheck. It's like if you don't do the work, you're not getting paid.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Now, just out of complete curiosity, because you've mentioned a couple of influences, what would you say is probably the biggest game growing up that has influenced you? Not necessarily the game, not necessarily for Forbidden Arts in terms of style, because you talked about Zelda and Street Fighter, but what was a big game growing up that just really got you into? You mentioned Super Mario, kind of where you started.
Sure.
Was there one in particular that sticks out in your mind as the game that influenced you to maybe decide to start to go down this direction, or?
Probably Super Mario World. Yeah, probably Super Mario World from Super Nintendo. That was probably the game that kind of really was my first inspiration for the very first game that I made. Which wasn't very good. I don't need to talk about that, but it was it was my inspiration.
I mean, it's your first game.
Yeah, and it was my inspiration, and I've always loved the Mario franchise, but like Mario 64 is in my top 5 games of all time. I absolutely love that game, and it was also a big inspiration for how I integrated a lot of mechanics in the Forbidden Arts. So about how you traverse through like an overworld that's in 3D, and then you go into separate levels. That was actually inspired from Mario 64.
Okay.
So yeah, but not just that. But I'd say that Mario World, basically anything from my childhood was my original inspiration. It's kind of weird how that happened. I wasn't thinking very modern. I think if you try and think like you start out and as an indie and you kind of think like, oh, I want to make Devil May Cry 5. It's just like you're a fool. You're not going to be able to make that. I mean, you have to think low. You have to think more simple.
Yeah.
And I read some articles about that, just people's opinions way back in the day, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for something simple, and I'm definitely glad that I did, because I see a lot of indie developers starting out trying to make games that are way in over their head.
So just for fun to kind of wrap things up here a little bit, if you had to describe Forbidden Art in 5 words,
yeah,
what would you give us? If I said, tell me about your game in 5 words, what would you say?
Like a 5-word sentence?
yeah, 5-word sentence.
I'd say fiery action platform fantasy adventure.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
I like that you chose fiery first. That's
yeah.
Well, because you're a pyromancer, and the whole thing's based around learning elements of fire, and I can't stress that enough. I think that's what really makes the game fun too, is the way that you use these abilities that you learn, and the way it all ties into the story. I think that's one of the more fun things that I enjoy about the game as well. It's not just the action and the platforming. Like I really like how everything ties in, especially towards the end. Like I love how it all transitions. I think that's I don't know how many people are going to play it through to the end. I hope people enjoy it enough that they do, but that's definitely I love how everything just climaxes.
So now you talked about earlier about like your backstory and like how you've worn different hats throughout your life. But if you weren't developing this game, if that wasn't the path that you had recently chosen, what would you be doing?
Are we talking like my fantasy reality or my reality?
Let's do both.
As a fantasy reality, I would be a rock star, hands down. In fact, I pursued that for a little while, and then I realized I don't know if I really have that cut out, but I had fun while I tried. And then as a reality, I would probably, if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be doing some sort of boring business management thing. I mean, I'm just being honest,
No, that's we appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably what I'd be doing.
Okay.
I'm glad I'm not.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a different choice than game development or rock.
Yeah, now that would be one hell of a life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
As much as I love game development, I think I might trade it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think once you would become a rock star, you could certainly use your business management skills to build an empire.
There's a lot of people that do this stuff like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, so it looks like a gorgeous game. We haven't really talked much about the look of it, but I did want to mention that as we're wrapping up here, it looks like a gorgeous game, and I'm looking forward to playing it on the PS4 because, I have a PC, and Matt and I are hardcore PlayStation boys, and so I saw on your Twitter a couple weeks ago you mentioned about save progress coming along nicely on the version of the PS game.
I could tell you where it's at if you want to know. the PS4 port, I actually just finished all of the certification requirements, integrating them. So at this point, we're basically ready to start testing on PS4. So, awesome. But it's not a quick process.
Yeah, no.
Of course.
So it's gonna take some time.
I do have one important question. Matt probably knows where I'm going with this. Will the Forbidden Arts have a platinum trophy?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yes,
that's right. Because I give us a hard time every week. We read off the blog every week on our podcast of the new games coming out, and sometimes I'm super excited. And I give them a hard time when they don't have a platinum trophy.
You know, I don't see the reason to not include one. I guess it's a lot of people like them, so I mean, I don't know. There's 60 trophies in the game.
Oh
wow!
So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. But
Rob is super. You don't understand how excited Rob got right as you said that.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that like all the extra achievements and trophies and stuff, and there's 60 of them in there, and I mean, if you collect them all, I mean, it's gonna take you a while. I don't, realistically, like the game time can vary quite a bit depending on the player. Like we've seen some players like their play time is at like 30 hours and they're only like maybe halfway through the game, but the game is designed, if you were to just kind of charge through it your very first go without knowing anything, we're kind of expecting people to be able to like complete it in maybe 12 hours if they're pretty good. Otherwise, I think it's really tough to say like a range, but if you go for all the trophies and you go for 100%, I mean, you could easily do 30 to 40.
And that's I think because I know one of the struggles sometimes with a single player game is replayability. I think for people like me, that's what adds to it. And so, I love, after I've gone through a story, I love going back and getting that little stuff or playing through it again. That's the reason for me to play the game again. And so the fact that you've got more trophies than God of War tells me that
that game is awesome.
It is. That tells me I'll be playing it for a while, though, too. So I'm excited about that. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it just made sense. I mean, our Steam version has 66 achievements. We actually had to delete a few for PS4.
Well, that's exciting.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, just kind of wrap things up, Sterling, unless Matt has anything else. If you just kind of want to tell us where we can find you, where people can check out more about the game. Certainly we know it's on Steam in early access. But if you want to tell us about the rest, social media and website where we can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me personally. I run the Twitter account, so you can always just go on Twitter and look for Stingbot Games. So it's always me posting on there. And then there's Facebook. You can look up Forbidden Arts on there. There's a Facebook page for Forbidden Arts. And then you can also go to our website, which is just stingbotgames.com, and find everything there as well.
Sterling, thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And guys, that's going to wrap up our indie interview today. And until next time, game on.
Game on. This is the outro music. Another indie developer interview in the books.
I feel like I needed a Coke can to crack open.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Like refreshing.
No, that was when you did that. I was like, yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah.